The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Vinsanity! I didn't want to start by saying hello this time. I thought I'd try something new. Dan Besbris here, Fantasy NBA Today, the podcast, and he is Vince Miracle. So we're just jumping right in, not the usual slow, soft open here on our late week edition of the podcast. However, I will ask, because I'm a very polite man, Vince, how are you?
What's up, Thunder Dan? You're coming out with some thunder today.
It's all I got in the tank. I figured I would sort of use it all up right at the beginning of the show and then take a nap and let you run. I am gassed today, and apologies to our avid listeners who may have been expecting a show on Thursday. One of the local radio show hosts in Bakersfield had to go out of town, and I was called in to sub on air for hosting a show with my broadcast partner with the Blaze, and that fell right into the window where we normally record the podcast. So because it's the off season, we can kind of move shows around a tiny bit. News hasn't changed a great deal over the last 24 hours. Free agency is cooling after a rabid start last week, but there are some kind of interesting, more topical stories in the NBA that are not necessarily fantasy relevant, but they are incredibly interesting. And so I want to do the unthinkable here, Vince, and use a little bit of time on our podcast to talk about just general things happening in the NBA, and then we'll move along and we'll get to a little bit of the Pacific Division today and what those non-Golden State Warrior teams have done to shore up their teams or to kind of shore up their culture. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. So, Vince, without further ado, I'm just going to launch us headlong into this thing. I want to keep us moving along here at a nice rapid clip. It's Friday. People are ready to listen to some basketball podcast and then hit the weekend. And the first thing that jumped out to me, and this is, we'll start with the uplifting story of the week, was Craig Sager accepting the Jimmy V, the Arthur Ashe Award at the ESPYs, which I just thought was so darn cool and so darn emotionally charged, and I was thrilled for him, and I was kind of thrilled for the award show. That was a great moment.
Yeah, I watched it this morning, just his speech and the other thing that we're going to talk about with the players. But yeah, it was very motivational. I mean, the things that he has had to go through and the fight that he's going up against with leukemia. I mean, you got to applaud Craig Sager, and it's cool that he got to win that award and, take that stage and win the Jimmy V Award. So, the fight's real. I know someone who's 15 who just was diagnosed with the same exact thing that Craig Sager has. Shout out to you, Dalton. But yeah, so, I mean, it's a real fight. I know that they're trying to find a cure. And, yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't seen that speech, definitely go check it out. And it was something to – it was definitely something to watch. It's just something to listen to.
Yeah, he had a funny little one-liner in there about interviewing Greg Popovich while the team was down mid-ball game, kind of comparing it to some of the most insane things he's done in his life, parachuting out of planes and climbing the Great Wall and all sorts of stuff, and then he threw in a little pop reference. So that was excellent. And I think certainly, Vince, all of us may not know somebody with leukemia, but I'm betting that almost everybody listening to this program knows someone impacted by cancer in some capacity. So, again, that's a fantastic job by ESPN to cross over as well. I mean, let's remember here that Craig Sager is a TNT broadcaster. He's been with the Turner Network for many, many, many years, and ESPN generally in direct competition with them for basketball viewership and for sports viewership. So pretty darn cool that they crossed over networks, gave an award to somebody who doesn't really work for them, but was able to draw attention to his fight and to the fight of so many people out there that are also battling similar diseases or other sort of long-term ailments that can really knock you on your keister, and he keeps getting back up again. The other thing over at the ESPYs earlier this week was a number of NBA superstars using their superstar platform to talk about social change. And, you have to toe the line a little bit, Vince, in the way that you talk about stuff nowadays. But in my estimation, and I'll try to be as calculated as possible in how I present this, I have very strong feelings on all of it. But for those listening, I think suffice it to say, I am very, very excited that athletes are once again using their platform to try to better the world. And that's sort of the simple version of it. I know that there's a lot of charged tensions, whether it's racially. Recently, that's been, of course, right in the spotlight. One thing I think, Vince, we can all agree on is that we need to end violence somehow. And the first step is kind of admitting that there's a problem on both sides of whatever issue you're looking at, and then coming together to come up with a solution. So I thought that was really cool, too. Just a few weeks after the passing of Muhammad Ali, who was kind of at the forefront of athletes enacting social change. So kudos to the NBA superstars for talking out, because these are role models, Vince. These are guys that kids look up to. Sometimes kids that maybe you're out on the street, tough kids that need role models, that want to make the world a better place. So I applaud them for kind of taking a chance, and they towed the line well also, just the way we're doing on the podcast. But who can argue with making the world a better place?
Yeah, just stop the violence is really what they were preaching, not necessarily about racism or the things like that. It was just that we gotta stop racially profiling people and just know that we are all on this planet. We are all individuals. We are all one people, and we got to live here all together. So all lives matter, and that's what they were trying to say on that stage. And I appreciate them using that platform, because you're right. I mean, kids look up to these guys. They're not just basketball players. They're role models. They're superstars. And for them to come out and say it in such a big and bold way on a platform like the ESPYs, where millions of people are watching and thousands or hundreds of people are sitting in those stands. I mean, it was very empowering to see that from those players, and having a guy like LeBron James, who had just won the title and is probably the face of the NBA right now, without a doubt, the face of the NBA right now, to be on that stage and say what he said. I mean, I applaud Carmelo, Chris Paul, and the entire NBA organization, and of course, and the players that were on that stage. So yeah,
NBA's always done a really nice job of kind of staying progressive in social issues. I think that's they've really done a nice job lately. And Adam Silver, who's had to deal with some of that in the past couple of seasons, that is Donald Sterling, is also in the news, not necessarily for taking a platform at the ESPYs, but for making a statement that he felt like Kevin Durant joining the Warriors and super teams in general is bad for the league. And, I know we're sort of jumping from topic to topic here, Vince, but I thought that was just such an interesting statement. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of let people know what he says, that he did say, I don't think it's good for the league, just to be clear. I do not think that it's ideal for the league to deal from that standpoint. For me, it's part about designing collective bargaining agreement that encourages the distribution of great players throughout the entire league. I mean, do I agree with it? Yeah, I mean, it kind of does. It kind of does suck when you're going into next season, and most people's mindsets are, I mean, what team can really defeat the Warriors right now? I mean, this is peak small ball basketball. You're gonna have guys like Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, Iguodala, Clay, and Curry all on the court at the same exact time, all on the same team. And it's not even an all-star game. They're fighting for a championship, and you're looking at that and you're going, okay, what team can stop it? Can the reigning champ Cleveland Cavaliers stop that just because they have LeBron James? I don't think so. I mean, you're entering a league now where the odds of the Warriors winning, just by Vegas lines, you have to bet over $120 just to get $200 back. I think it is. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I completely agree. I think the league is better when the entire league is competitive. And it makes it more fun to watch.
So here's the question, though. The NBA, just the way it's designed, because superstars can carry teams and there are only 5 guys that are playing at any one time, is always going to be a difficult league to achieve parity, where with baseball there's so much probability involved and so much sort of statistical bumps and analysis and regression and so many weird factors that can knock out of whack that you end up having some measure of parity. And with football, you've got 900 guys on the field at any one time, so you've got a certain measure of parity there. You talk about offense, defense, and special teams. What are you looking at there? Something like 33 guys that are ready to go at any given moment?
Yeah,
So
but with NFL, I mean, as long as you have a good quarterback and a person that can catch a football fairly well, I mean, you can go pretty far.
yeah, so it's easier to achieve parity in the two other major sports, and hockey is it's one of the big four, but it's not one of the ones that's jumping out as the the largest viewership and money involved. But when you talk about the NBA, I don't know that there are enough factors that can go in either direction where you can achieve that kind of parity. And Vince, how many superstars would you say we legitimately have in the league right now anyway? 5?
Superstars?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 5. Is James Harden a superstar? I don't think so.
I mean, even let's talk about it liberally. Let's give out the term superstar as easily as possible. You're still only looking at 8, maybe, superstars in the league. So how do the other 22 teams compete? They just can't really. It's not built that way. It's a superstar-driven league. So as much as Adam Silver wants parity, he's only going to get tastes of it. It's just not the way the NBA's built. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think that, yes, I agree that it's not great for the regular season to have super teams because it does sort of, to anybody who's not rooting for one of those mega teams, whether it's the Warriors right now or Cleveland or Miami in the past or Boston when they had the big three or the Lakers when they were assembling every aging star on the planet. If you're not rooting for one of those main teams that's got a few stars or a few superstars, the regular season doesn't feel that interesting. You have a pretty good idea of who's going to emerge at the top, who's the cream of the crop. You don't maybe even believe that you can beat them in the playoffs, so it does drive down the engagement. However, for him to come out and say it and be the mouthpiece for owners at this juncture when it's all still so fresh, I'm not sure that was the greatest move just in terms of timing. I feel like this could have waited. It could have sort of slid under the radar if he took maybe even another week or two before coming out and speaking on behalf of, I'm sure, a few owners that complained to him about it. But on the other hand, Vince, the players have some measure of power. I mean, the owners are billionaires, and a lot of the players are millionaires, and that's a big difference still. So for anybody to kind of feel bad for ownership, I think is misplaced. If you want to feel bad for a fan that doesn't feel like their team can win now, well, then they just, I guess, got to go out and get the next super team, no?
I mean, you said you think it'd be best for him to wait like a week or two. I mean, I understand his standpoint. I mean, Silver was just, I mean, he even says it in his statement later on that he respects to let the player have the decision of where they want to go. His thing is, and I think it's kind of with like the broader idea of this collective bargaining agreement, and why he brought it up is that this is the time where they're going to start talking about the collective bargaining cycle and what they're going to do next. And as we already saw, and I think we spoke about it on Tuesday, the league dropped the salary cap for next year. The salary cap jumped down from, I think it was like 118 to now 113, which does actually, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it does cause a problem for a team like the Warriors, because when you're having free agents like Klay Thompson, Curry, and Iguodala, I even think Draymond Green's a restricted free agent as well. But when you're seeing those names, one of those guys are not going to be able to be retained unless you're moving some contracts around, but they also still need a 15-man roster. So, I mean, I think what they're looking at is just a way in which players just can't come out together and say, you know what, I'm going to go join this team, and just because the money is there, like with baseball, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they have that thing in baseball now where like everybody's salary cap is kind of put together. Am I wrong?
They do. Yeah, there's no official salary cap on a baseball team. There are luxury taxes that get paid, but there's no salary cap. So if you want to pay, you can build a $400 million team if you want.
I think that maybe that's something that the league is going to look into, because these smaller markets, let's say like Sacramento, because I'm from here, Minnesota, these smaller teams, they're not ever going to land the guy like a Kevin Durant. Not because their team isn't good, not because the city isn't great, but because they're a small market team. And they're not going to have the money to be able to give that type of player. And I think maybe that's something the league is going to have to look at if they're going to keep this collective bargaining agreement and the money that they're distributing to the players and to the ownership groups so high, and if it's going to keep growing. So maybe that's something they look into. But growing these super teams like the Warriors have done now, I don't know. I do understand and kind of get why fans are kind of turned off by something like this, and why even a guy like Adam Silver, the commissioner of the league, is turned off by something like this, because I mean it makes fans want to go see that game. But I mean, how much do fans really want to go see their team play when you already know when you go see them play against, let's say, the Warriors, there's a high chance they're going to lose.
Yeah, you're going to get your tail handed to you a little bit. So as long as whatever they come up with still gives the players a legitimate amount of power, the thing that worries me a little bit on this topic is that this last collective bargaining agreement was actually designed to try to give teams more ability to retain their superstars, the ability to give them an extra year on a contract, and to give them more money to stay put. It turns out isn't really making all that much of a difference. So they probably will try to go back to the drawing board. The players keep giving concessions, and they still end up somehow irritating ownership. So anyway, I thought those topics were kind of interesting. I'm glad we at least touched upon them on this show, but I do want to spend a little bit of time looking at some of the acquisitions, some of the free agent signings out in the Pacific Division, because to me it's relatively simple. I don't think that we're going to spend a ton of time on it, and that's why it fit well here with this kind of half-and-half program. And we will end, Vince, with your Sacramento Kings, because I know you have thoughts on how they've operated this offseason so far. And we've already talked about the Golden State Warriors. By the way, for those listening to Fantasy NBA Today, if you'd like to check out some of our previous podcasts, earlier this week we did an episode on the Spurs and the Rockets and sort of the fallout from what happened to them in the offseason. And last week we looked at the Dwayne Wade move and the Kevin Durant move. So feel free to go back and check out some of those older episodes.
Subscribe and rate.
Yeah, there you go. Give us a nice mark there, huh? I don't even. The internet is a fancy place, Vince. I don't pretend to understand it. So out west, not particularly large changes going on outside of the Warriors, of course, but changes nonetheless. And we'll start with the Lakers, because to me that it's sort of a 6 to 1, half dozen type situation. They retained Jordan Clarkson, which I think they knew they had to do, and they didn't really overpay for him. And then they brought in Timofey Mozgov, Luol Deng, and traded for Jose Calderon. Do any of those guys, outside of Clarkson, because I think everybody listening knows the Lakers' core young four right now, the Russell, Clarkson, Randall, and Ingram, those guys are going to be on the floor, and they're going to see time. So I guess maybe my question for you, Vince, is does Timofey Mozgov play enough minutes to be relevant? Does Luol Deng play enough minutes to be relevant? And we both know Jose Calderon will not play enough minutes to be relevant.
Mozgov. I mean, they paid him. They got to play him.
You'd think so, right?
Well, I mean, you can't have Randall at the 5, and that's why I was going to kind of throw that question to you, because you are a Lakers fan. And so you're looking at this team here, and when I'm looking at this team, my biggest question is where are you playing Luol Deng? Is he going to be that stretch 4 where you're going to have him on the floor with Ingram? Is he coming off the bench? Is Ingram coming off the bench? Is Randall coming off the bench? Like, how are they going to run this team? I think they paid Mozgov because they did not want to pay Roy Hibbert, and that's why he's going to be the hands down starter walking in on opening night.
Oh, Roy. Slow Roy. He is off. He is moving. I still love his Twitter handle, though. That's Roy Meets World. It's still hilarious. So you think Mozgov is worth drafting, or do you think he's a guy that maybe you try to snatch up off the waiver wire if he starts to clear 27, 28 minutes a ball game?
I'll say this. I think last year when the Cavs were making that playoff run and you had to see Mozgov get minutes, and I actually think our buddy Aaron talked about it too last year when this stuff started coming up, is that Mozgov is a guy who can rebound and has like a little post game work but really he's gonna get you all of that fantasy value in the defensive side of the floor. So he gets you a block or two, and I think he is gonna see a lot of minutes at that center position if he stays healthy and how ready he is for the NBA after basically riding the bench all season long to his ring. So
you'd take a flyer on him in a late round, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, it's a 12-man roster. If I'm in need of a center in that 12th round, why not?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think I probably stamp Luol Deng with the someone else's headache mark because you just don't really know how he's going to be used. I think he will, by the way, have some measure of relevance, but he's not a great fantasy skill set guy if he's not playing Tom Thibodeau level 45 minutes a ball game. So I think maybe you let somebody else take a chance on him. You know what? If he ends up putting up good numbers and that person has success, don't begrudge them. But there are other places to spend your draft picks, and we'll talk more about the young guys on the Lakers as the season gets closer. The Clippers didn't make many changes. They brought back Jamal Crawford, they brought back Baby Rivers, and they added Mo Spates. I like that move, but they did lose Cole Aldrich. So does anything change?
Big loss.
Does anything change with this team at all? It seems like the exact same makeup.
I honestly think Cole Aldridge was actually a big loss because of what he was able to do when Blake Griffin was out with that broken hand and the hamstring, and then in the limited minutes that he played, and then also when DeAndre Jordan had his issues and was on the bench. I think Cole Aldridge was a huge guy for that team. But you're right, he's gone now. I think Mo Spates is someone that you're gonna want to look at as a waiver wire watch player because he's gonna have those games. Honestly, I'm looking at him as like a value play for DFS already because he's gonna get 15, 20 minutes a game, and he can score the basketball, and he's been showing that he can shoot that three-point jumper, and he's a muscle guy, he's an energy guy, and he likes to grab rebounds and scream on the floor a lot, even when a lot of that screaming is for no reason.
Yeah, he's really more of a two-category guy, though, correct? Points and rebounds?
Yeah, points, rebounds. He's not going to do much else for you. But there was news here, Dan, that I want to bring up to you about this Clippers team. I don't know if you saw it, but it was Sporting News. Sean Devney, I believe his name is. I could be butchering that last name. But supposedly the Sacramento Kings, Pacific Division, that's why I'm bringing it up, the LA Clippers, team we're talking about now, and the Boston Celtics are talking about a 3-team deal that would send Blake Griffin to the Celtics, Rudy Gay to the Clippers, and then some draft picks are going to be thrown around. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I don't get that either. Why would the Clippers do that?
Why would the Kings do that? What do they get in return?
The Kings better get about 3 top picks somewhere in that. That's because they're getting nothing, it sounds like, in terms of the superstars. So they would, I guess, get what they call the assets when people talk about the NBA. I'll believe that when I see it, Vince. That's how I feel about that rumor.
Me too. I just wanted to address it just because we are talking about the West, and I'll be addressing it on my show later this week. A show coming out on Monday of next week.
Vince, where can somebody check out that program?
You guys can check out the King's Court podcast on iTunes. Just type in the King's Court and look for the Sac Kings Nation logo. It's on there, and we do 2 shows a week, and we actually have a brand new game coming out on Monday, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of this game. Do you like the way I teed that one up for you?
Yeah, you did. You kind of just let me knock that out of the park like that walk-off home run that you called last night.
Yeah, the Blaze, man. One of their top prospects in the Mariners farm system, Drew Jackson, a walk-off grand slam home run. So I'm a little gassed this morning. But yeah, I don't. I mean, the only reason why the Clippers would do something like that is just to change something, and I mean that's
I just see
foolish.
no reason for it. I mean, if there anything I can say about that team is in the West, the Clippers have shown that they can fight with the Warriors. Now, I don't know if they can fight with this new Warriors team with Kevin Durant there, and I don't know who'd be guarding KD. Is it going to be Wes Johnson when they play them? But I mean, they've shown that they can fight with the Warriors for 3 quarters. They always crumble in the 4th, though, and that's where you're going to start seeing a huge amount of their issues going into next season is can they close out games and how are they going to face off against the Warriors. But I will say this, with the team that's set up and how the league is structured right now in that West, I'm gonna go off on an early prediction, and I have the right to change it when we start doing our season preview here, Dan. But I'm going on a bold prediction right now. It's an early one. Chris Paul and the L.A. Clippers will finally make it to the Western Conference Finals.
I think they got a good shot. I don't think that you don't sound crazy to me. By the way, good point. The Clippers did also re-sign Wesley Johnson. That I glossed over that contract move. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma City's been sort of taken out of the running for Western Conference Finals action, and they may be completely irrelevant if Russell Westbrook gets traded anytime soon. You've got the Spurs, you've got the Warriors, and you've got the Clippers. And I don't know, does anybody that to me feels like, I mean, you've got your top one in Golden State, but that second tier of Spurs and Clips, is there anybody else really that falls into that category? I don't think so.
I think a dark horse team that you're definitely going to watch out for is Portland.
I think they're pretty good, but I do think they're still sort of one click down. If the Clippers were healthy this year, yeah. And I think people are interested to see what the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be able to do this year. But of course, health has often been an issue for that team. They ran out some of the most ridiculous lineups towards the end of the regular season, and everybody jockeying for position to try to play them when the playoffs came around this last year. That was a tough luck situation for Memphis. So I mean they're in the running for the playoff team certainly. But yeah, I mean the
next
Clippers
tier down. Those top three in the West of Warriors, Spurs, and Clips. Those are the top three tier, and of course the Warriors are on their own tier of itself because of that super team. I think after that you kind of have some of those mid-tier guys where you're going to see Portland. I even say a team like Dallas, who didn't get better, but they didn't get any worse either.
Yeah,
I think they basically stayed the same.
I agree.
So Portland, Dallas, and Memphis, I think are that other three teams, and then the questions for that bottom final two spots in the West. I think you're going to see between the Thunder, I still think, is a relevant team. I don't think you can count them out with a guy like Russell Westbrook and Victor Oladipo on a team together. I can't even think of any teams because I don't think Sacramento is worthy. I know people would want me to say that for who listen to the show. It's just not. I don't have that power to say that right now.
They're never going to believe us again if we drop that one on the program.
Oh yeah, no. I think also you got to look out for the Pelicans. I don't think they're going to be a playoff contending team, but I think they're someone that you might want to watch, and also Phoenix if they're healthy.
Yeah, that was going to be the next team I brought up, was the Phoenix Suns. They didn't really do much this offseason either. I think there's still time, potentially, for them to shuffle some bodies around. They re-signed Jared Dudley, and I think that's the only move they've made outside of having a couple of picks in the draft. What do we know in Phoenix? Is there...
Leonardo Barbosa also went back to Phoenix.
Yes, good point. The Brazilian blur returns to the Phoenix Suns. So, I mean, what can we expect from Phoenix? Do any of these, I guess from a fantasy standpoint, because there haven't been a ton of changes, I wouldn't expect there to be a great deal of adjustments season over season. Eric Bledsoe presumably will be healthy for at least part of a season. I mean, what are you looking out for with the Suns?
Do you stamp him with someone else's headache? The SEH award?
He's so good, though. That one's a tough one for me. I don't think...
That's why I had to question it to you.
I don't think I do. I don't think I stamp him with that. I think he's a guy that I would consider taking just on the hope that he... And maybe doesn't suffer such a debilitating injury. If he misses a week or two here and there, you can kind of expect that in the grind of an NBA season. But if he misses half the year, well, then you're looking uphill. But oh boy, when he's healthy, his numbers are tantalizing. He's so good. He's so
Jamal
quick.
Crawford called him Baby LeBron.
I mean, he's unbelievable. He's so strong for his size, and he's so quick, and he puts up such a nice fantasy stat set. I don't officially here, I will say it, I do not stamp him with someone else's headache. And as we get closer to the season, I will have a round to get him if somebody else doesn't take him before me. So I'll get that info to everybody as we get closer to the regular season. But I don't know. Phoenix is a team that I haven't poured over all that thoroughly. I'll admit it to this point because there haven't been that many changes.
They got three pretty good players in the draft with Dragon Bender, Marquise Chris, and who is the other guy they got? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Those are the
The
two
third.
key ones.
Yeah, I named off the number 4 pick and the number 8 pick.
All right, so I mean, do you think these guys are going to see significant playing time?
No, I really don't. I think maybe Bender's shown more promise than Chris. Chris is a developmental player. He's also a Sacramento local, but I mean he's very small and thin. He's very athletic though, but I think he's 2 to 3 years away from even being NBA relevant, let alone fantasy relevant. I think Dragan Bender has the potential since they're going to look for a stretch forward type of player. I think Bender can be that type of guy. He showed a little bit of promise here and there in the summer league. But I think if you're looking at fantasy players, of course, Eric Bledsoe is going to be the guy that you want to target. I have question marks though on that backcourt because who's getting traded? I mean, they have to trade somebody. I don't think Devin Booker, after what he showed last year, should be a 6-man type of player. And he's already shown, like, if you've seen pictures and videos of him now during this summer offseason right now, he's looking buffer. He's looking stronger, especially in the shoulder area, which is where he had a lot of issues where he was getting the ball ripped out of his hands when he was driving to the basket. So I really like Devin Booker. And I think if you're going to draft a guy like Brandon Knight or Eric Bledsoe, you kind of have to have that note in the back of your head that he may be the one that gets traded by that February trade deadline, and hopefully he just goes to the right team.
That's really well said, Vince. Last team here on this episode, and then we'll put a bow on it. Your Sacramento Kings, who brought in a couple of veterans in free agency. So without getting too much into the draft pick side, do you see Aaron Aflalo or Matt Barnes having a significant enough impact to draft in a fantasy draft?
If you're looking for points and threes, I think Aflalo is going to be your guy. I think he walks in as the starter. I think you're going to Ben McLemore wasn't fantasy relevant last year, but I think with the acquisitions of Aflalo and Temple, Ben McLemore is going to kind of fade off the depth chart, and I think that's why they're looking for him to be moved right now. But DFS wise, I am a huge fan of Garrett Temple and a huge fan of Aaron Aflalo because they are going to get plenty of touches, especially with the offense that Jaeger runs, which is going to be inside out, which I think is perfect for a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, who is a good passer at his position, and especially for his size, he sees the floor very well. And if you can get an Aaron Aflalo open or a Garrett Temple open in the corner, while they might not be great shooters, they are capable shooters. And I don't think you could expect anything more than some threes and some points from Aflalo. And I think with Temple, when he gets the minutes and he does play, I mean, you could see the defensive stats, but it just also depends on who's healthy and how many minutes he's actually getting. But Temple's a guy that you don't want to draft, but you might want to have him on your watch list when the season begins, because let's say Aflalo gets injured, I think he's the backup two guard, and he could be a guy that if Aflalo goes down and he sees 30 minutes a night, and he being Temple, he can be a guy that gets you maybe 3 rebounds, a steal or 2 with a 3-pointer and like 10 points. He can fill out a stat sheet, kind of do a Wes Johnson line for you.
Was Tyler Ulis the guy you were thinking of on the Phoenix roster?
That's who it was.
That, by the way, is pretty much all I had planned for this program. Vince, final thoughts before we wrap her up?
Yeah, so for the Kings still, Matt Barnes, I don't think he's really going to be fantasy relevant. I just think that he's the guy that's going to be able to defend. Was with Dave Yeager the season before. The rookies, Papagiannis, as we see in Summer League, he still needs time to adapt to the NBA. I don't know what you're expecting from him. Scal showed potential. I think he can be that Channing Frye type of player where he steps out a little bit and be a stretch four. I don't think any of these rookies are coming in and being anything special. Even Malachi Richardson, you've seen his shot be sporadic. So I wouldn't expect too much from the Kings this season. Kings fans who listen to this show and those who listen to the Kings Sport podcast, that you can subscribe on Twitter, you guys, or on iTunes, go there and subscribe and rate. Yeah, so look out for the content like that, but don't expect too much from the Kings. And awesome show today. Keep catching them all out there because I know Pokemon's still a huge thing since the last time we spoke. And guess what, Dan? I'm a level 8 now.
The pain is real. I actually now have to learn what the game means, and I may end up picking your brain. Probably not on air because I think we'll lose a lot of listeners that way. But we are going to be having a Pokemon promotion at the minor league ballpark, and so I got to figure out what it all means so that whatever we do actually is makes sense. I've been the trending stories, by the way. Every time I go to a news website, is somebody walking into traffic chasing Pokemon. This thing sounds more dangerous than fun.
No, it is so much fun. I'm level 8 right now. I'm about to find my first Jigglypuff.
Oh, for
Just
heaven's sake.
And I'm really on the search for a Charmander. So if you're in the Sacramento area and
Oh,
you
for
see a
heaven's sake.
Charmander, find me on Twitter at VM Center and just say, "Hey, Charmander in this location." You can like do a little map screen of it, and I'll be heading there.
Well,
And then you know what? While I'm there, we'll find the nearest gym. We'll team up and we'll beat that gym and we'll win.
I
Bam.
I think we've hit rock bottom. I think this is it. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. I'm at Dan Besbris on Twitter. Vince just gave you his handle, but it's VM Center. Hoop-ball.com is the website. Hoopball Tweets is the Twitter handle for the website. And that's all your logistical stuff. We'll be back with you on Tuesday of next week. We'll start floating across the country, picking away at free agent acquisitions on different teams, what their fantasy value may or may not be in the upcoming season. Of course, addressing any news as it comes out. This was Fantasy NBA Today, the weekend edition, and we'll catch up with you in a couple of days. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you soon. Catch them all? Is that right?
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.